So from the sun and the snow in the south of France back to the telephone. An amazing device. Just by picking this up and dialing, I could call any one of the 21 million people in this country who have a phone, or one of the 300 million people who have a phone all over the world. You can also get help, either for yourself or someone else, by dialing 999 and all sorts of other services. The weather forecast, the test match results, a recipe for the day, speaking clock, bedtime stories. Tourists actually who come to London can get a guide as to what's going on in their own language, and dial a disc. On March the 10th, 1875, Bell and Watson set up a new device called a liquid transmitter because it contained diluted sulfuric acid as a conductor. By now he'd moved to Boston in America. And as Watson checked the connections at his end, Bell was in another room topping up the acid. Then an accident happened. An accident that was to change the world.
Help me, I've spilt the acid!
Mr. Watson, come here, I want you!
Bell? Bell, I can hear you! Bell! Bell, I could hear you! It works!
And the world has never been the same since. They worked very hard, and just 1 year later, the first domestic telephones were invented, like these, called butter stamp, because they looked exactly like the sort of things that put a pretty pattern on the top of butter. They went around the world showing these to various people, including Queen Victoria. That was in 1878. She was so impressed, she immediately bought some and put them in her house in the Isle of Wight. 1 year later, 1879, and the first telephone exchange was opened in London, with only 8 subscribers. But masses of people joined ever since then. Now I'm going to see if this might be able to communicate me with somebody. It doesn't matter which one you put to your ear or speak into. There's a very unladylike way of doing it. You've got a whistle.
Hello? Hello? Hello!
Peter.
Oh.
Sorry, but one of the wires came out, so that's probably why I can't hear you. What is this? 'Cause it
Have
looks far
an
more
earpiece.
modern.
Well, this is actually the first commercially available telephone in Britain, and one of the interesting things, apart from the fact that it had 2 earpieces, is that it was so darn heavy they had to put it on the wall. You spoke into here, you listened with the 2 earpieces, and when you wanted to get the exchange, you pressed the button there to contact the operator and give the number.
Now, what sort of year was this built?
1880. But over here you can see how quickly things develop, because here is a model from 1882. In fact, this was designed by a Swedish telephone engineer called Ericsson, and it really is very ornate and lovely. And anything you had to be on tiptoe to sort of speak in it.
How about those, though, up there?
Well, oh, those are the terminals where the incoming wires came, and of course if you put your fingers across those you'd have got a shock.
Ah, sounds dangerous. And that bit, which I didn't understand.
Well, now that, if there was a storm around, the telephone wires might have caught lightning, and so what you had to do was, any time you heard a storm rumbling, plug that in and it kind of blanketed off the lightning.
That's a great idea, actually.
Things, as I say, went pretty swiftly, because only 3 years later we had this, which was really the first desk telephone. Of course, the great thing about this was the whole family could have a turn at speaking. But really, I suppose the basis for the modern telephone was when the receiver and the voice part came into one, and this was another invention of Ericsson, the Swede, and you turned the handle like that and got a lovely little tinkle when you wanted to dial a number.
It's very beautiful down there, so craftsmen were being used as well.
They were indeed, and of course then we moved in fact to 1897, and the Americans stepped in, and of course wanting chrome plate and everything.
But that's one step back. I mean, they've now separated them again.
They called this the Candlesticks Phone, and so if you remember those old American movies, the guy sort of picks it up and holds it in one hand and shouts across the office, "Hello, get me the front page," you know, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one. This is 1912, and this is the British telephone that became the basis for automatic telephone dialing, with the first automatic exchanges, which were at Epsom, incidentally, and you can see that you dialed out like that.
They're pretty strange fingers, though.
I think you had to be a pterodactyl to do it. Another
Really?
candlestick phone with a dial on it, of course, bit of a step back, but finally we came to the 30s, which is this. The only interesting thing about this, really, is that it had this little arm on it on which an extra earpiece hung called mother-in-law's earpiece, so that mother-in-law could listen in on it.
They still have that in France, incidentally.
Well, they do. Well, of course, in the 20s and the 30s, the telephone really spread like wildfire.
Since the 30s, the look of the telephone doesn't really seem to have changed very much at all, or has it? This starting from next month, anybody can have all over Great Britain for just a little bit of extra rental charges, and all you do is punch the numbers. And almost immediately, that starts dialing it through. Of course, you might take that off first, but I'm not trying to call anybody right now. This is very important for the almost deaf, because this has an amplifier for sound on the earpiece here, and you can turn it up as loud as you want or as soft as you want, which means that the partially deaf can actually take telephone calls. This one's my favourite, because you don't really need this at all. All you do is dial or press buttons and then yell into here, and the sound comes out there. This one is a sort of punch card system. You get given these cards, put them in this holder, and then with this stylus you thump out the holes so that you get an already coded piece of card like that. Now that says Mick, and I'm going to see if it works. You take this off, listen for a dialing tone and put that in, and it eats it.
Hello there. Hello. Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. It's working. Okay. See you later.